Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Namaste Village. Wednesday. Hello, Pam. So lovely to see you back. We are here on purpose. On purpose. What other reason could there be? We're not here by accident. I promise you that. There may have been times when we thought we were here by accident, where we made it seem as if, oh, we just kind of showed up. We just sort of landed here and all of this was going on. No. In fact, I believe that each one of us made a decision to be here before time even began, especially to this moment, the moment of the awakening. What are we awakening to? What else? Love. But not the love that we've designed or believed in or tried to even capture. The ego's version of love, which is here and then gone and then back and then gone again. But a love that is uncompromised, a love that is whole and holy. Everything else just passes away, doesn't it? But love. That divine love that teaches us and reminds us of our true identity. This is forever, forever with us. We're going to talk about that today, but I want to begin by talking about that which seems to pass away. This morning at breakfast, I love the breakfast table because there are always so many conversations that just sort of guide their way into the session. So today at our table, we were talking about impermanence. And you know what it started with? Blockbuster. Do you remember Blockbuster? You remember when there was a Blockbuster on almost every corner? And at least twice a week, you go to Blockbuster. So you could find 2 or 3 movies and get the big VHS tapes. And if you went to Blockbuster with a friend or two, you were there forever because you couldn't all decide. It was so hard. Oh, I've already seen that one. And then suddenly, Blockbuster was gone. Someone said this morning that there's one left. Somewhere in Texas, someone was determined to keep this tradition of renting DVDs or VHS tapes alive. So there's one Blockbuster. It used to be there were every corner, practically every neighborhood. Impermanence. Nothing lasts. There's so many other things. We were also talking about, I remember back in the 80s, the mid 80s, when there were all of these, they called them new age stores that were showing up. Do you remember those? And you'd go to them and it was like, a new crystal or a new book on channeling. I remember that they were audio tapes, I believe, and there was this channeler named Lazarus. Do you remember that? Anybody ever listen to a Lazarus tape? Oh my goodness, I couldn't wait for the next Lazarus tape to come out. And it was a man, and I don't remember the man's name, but he would channel this ascended being called Lazarus, and he talked kind of funny. It was like, ooh, I am Lazarus. I am come now. It was very dramatic. I was really into it. Now you have to remember, I'm a little Catholic boy. I just graduated from a Jesuit university, just recently left the Franciscan order. So this was really interesting. The first book, this may be true for a lot of you, the first book I ever read was Autobiography of a Yogi. I think Autobiography of a Yogi is a gateway book. How many of you read that? And maybe it was the first or one of the first sort of metaphysical books that you read. It blew my mind, especially being a very mystical Catholic up to that point. All the mystical experiences that Yogananda was having, oh, that really spoke to me. But before you knew it, all of those stores were gone. Even the really big popular ones in LA was called the Bodhi Tree. Everybody went to the Bodhi Tree. In Chicago was Transitions. They're all gone. Because everything changes in form. Things come along to take the place of what was prior. You can still get the books and whatever you want, but in a very new way. But there is one thing that has always remained and has always been our greatest teacher, and that's stories. Stories. Parables. All the great teachers always talked in stories, because this is the best way for us to hear, because it helps us to relax. Our critical mind sort of steps to the side because, oh, we're like children listening to a story. And the message, the mystical teaching, slides in without effort. Well, as you know, this week and maybe for a few weeks to come, we'll see how it goes. We've been telling some stories. As you know, I love stories. They say I'm a good storyteller, and I'll embrace that. And another storyteller that I love and a great teacher that I mentioned a couple of days ago is a Jesuit priest named Anthony de Mello, or Anthony de Mayo. And Anthony was a great storyteller. He's such a powerful voice because from India, from the East, he became a Jesuit priest. So he really brings the balance between Eastern philosophy and Western. But he's also a great storyteller. And I've been reading a few of his parables, his 1-minute wisdom. But I also wanted to share a video that I found, just to give you more of an idea of Tony. I had the chance once to spend time with a Jesuit who was his kind of right-hand person, who took over the foundation that he started, and he had such wonderful things to say about his friend. He was the real deal. So I'm going to just show you this little clip here. One moment. And then we'll talk a little further. Bring it full screen.
Let me begin with something that people are always saying to me. They know I'm a Catholic priest. And so they say to me, could you help us to pray? You know, I've written a book on prayer. Could you help us to pray better? So let's begin with that. How could we pray better? For that, you might have to revise your notions on prayer somewhat radically. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to do for you this evening. Let me begin by telling you what I think prayer is not. And maybe the best way to tell you that is by telling you a story. There's this guy who comes to see a great Sufi master. And he says to the master, "Master, so great is my trust in God that I haven't even tied my camel to the post outside. I have left it to the providence of God and the care of God." And the Sufi master says, "Go out and tie that camel to the post, you fool." God cannot be bothered doing what you can do for yourselves. Pretty good, huh? That is very important to keep in mind when we talk about prayer. God cannot be bothered doing for you what you can do for yourself. Reminded of the Jewish rabbi who had served God faithfully all his life. And he said one day to God, "God, I have been a devout worshiper and I have kept the law as best I could. And I've been a good Jew. Now I'm old and I need some help. Let me win the lottery. It will help for my old age." Well, he prayed and he prayed and he prayed and he prayed. And 1 month went by, and 2 and 3 and 5, and a whole year went by, and 3 years went by. And the man in desperation one day said, "God, give me a break." And God said, "Give me a break yourself, buy a ticket."
buy a ticket. Stories. Did you feel how your mind just sort of relaxed? You weren't listening as intently. Maybe you just sort of sat back in your chair and you listened to these fun little stories that taught you about prayer. He's so good at that. And that's why stories will never go away. Blockbuster, all of these other stores and other ideas and concepts, they'll pass by, but stories will always remain because they're our greatest teacher. So I want to share, where did my phone? Here it is. I want to share one more. By the way, I know that I forgot to do our opening prayer. We're doing the peace prayers this week and for a couple of weeks. So we'll end with one of our peace prayers. Because that's the other thing, by the way, stories and prayers and music, they all have a way of sliding around to the back door and entering fully intact, as opposed to listening to a great theological or spiritual concept or discussion that go through the front door. They have to pass through all the filters that are right behind the front door. All the beliefs and ideas and decisions we've made in the past, all of those things are filters. And if you hear me or anyone else deliver this fantastic, deep, profound spiritual lesson, it has to go through the front door and pass through all of those filters. And maybe some of it will make it all the way to the heart. But stories, music, art, beauty, all of these things, they don't bother going through the front door. They slip around to the back door where there are no filters. There's no past, there's only now, and they enter fully intact. If you hear a great song that just moves you to the core, that's because it slipped into the back door. If you hear a story that teaches you a profound lesson, it may be the same profound lesson that some great saint or guru delivered in eloquent language, but the story takes us so much further. So Tony DeMello, he wrote a book called 1 Minute Wisdom. And I've really enjoyed some of the stories that I've heard and read. So let me read this one that I just came across. Don't look for God, the master said. Just look, and all will be revealed. But how is one to look? His disciples asked. Each time you look at anything, see only what is there and nothing else. See only what is there and nothing else. The disciples were bewildered, so the master made it simpler. For instance, he said, when you look at the moon, see the moon and nothing else. The disciples said, what else could one see except the moon when one looks at the moon? A hungry person could see a ball of cheese. A lover, the face of their beloved. We see what we long to see. We see what we seem to lack. We see what we truly desire. If you were really hungry and you hadn't eaten in 2 days and you look upon anything, the first thought in your mind might be, I wonder how that tastes. Or if you're deeply in love, everything will reflect the beloved. Everything will remind you of the beloved. But what he's asking in this 1 minute wisdom is let all of that fall away. Come with what? Anybody know? Holy empty hands unto God. Let go of every idea, every thought, every concept, even everything that you think you love, everything that is bound by time, everything that is in your mind. Let it all go and come with wholly empty hands unto God. Of course, in this story, Tony's not talking about the moon. He's talking about something so much bigger. We could call that God. We could call that love. We could call it many things. We could call it nothing if we want. The Tao, the way, the force. I've said before that these days, being a Star Wars guy, the force seems to do it better than anything else for me. God is not this being, this entity somewhere out there. God is everywhere, everywhere at once. I don't believe in God. What I believe in is only God. And these stories help me to experience that. And it's true, like many of you, I do spend time listening to some of these great teachers like Anthony de Mello. Last night, I was also watching a videotape of Joel Goldsmith. I love Joel Goldsmith because, he's an old-timey guy. He was around before A Course in Miracles and before any of this stuff was hip and cool. And if you listen to his audio tapes, he kind of talks funny because he talks like he's from the 50s. You want to know why? Because he was. He talks like this New York guy, giving a lecture to a group in the 1950s. And that's when he was doing it, in the 1950s and early 60s. He was sharing this deep wisdom in a way that he could be heard. He told stories, he shared anecdotes, he helped people connect with the great story, the prodigal son, our return. Jesus was the greatest storyteller, and that may have been his greatest story. The son who demands to get his share of the inheritance even before his father died. I mean, imagine that, those of you who have kids. How would you feel if your child came and said, I don't want to wait till you die. I want it now. So can you split everything up? I've got my brother. He's going to get half. I'm going to get half. Can you just cut it in half now so I can go off and have a great time? Most of us would probably say, I don't think so. But in the story, the father says, okay, no problem. He gives his son the inheritance and he goes off and has a grand time. And it doesn't take long before, as we know, it's all gone because everyone comes to him. When you're the only one at the party that has the money, do you remember when you were young and you're the one to get the weed, you're the one to get the beer, you're the one to get everything, or whatever it may be. You're the one because you're the one with, and of course, because you want to be accepted. This is where your value lies. So you happily, gladly go out, and before long, guess what? It's all gone. And what happens to all your friends? They're gone as well. That's the story. And we can all relate to that in some way or another. We've all had an experience similar to that at one time or another. And what happens to the son? He has to resort to desperation to the point that he's having to feed the pigs. Now, you have to remember who Jesus is telling this story to. He's telling it to a group of Jews. So imagine them hearing, and then he went to feed the pigs, like the lowest thing they could possibly do. He has been reduced from this guy with a lot of money, the life of the party, to having to feed the pigs. And he would gladly even eat what the pigs are eating. And finally, guess what? He comes to his senses and returns home, thinking, of course, just as we would think, that we're going to be lucky if we're treated like one of our Father's servants. But that's not what happens at all. The father, seeing the son from a great distance, comes out to meet him, throws his arms around him, puts a ring on his finger and shoes on his feet. They kill the fatted calf and have a huge party because his son that was dead has now come back to life. And this is a lesson what? About value. What do you value the most? Did the father stand there at the entrance of the gate and said, I knew you'd be back. I knew that you were going to waste everything. All right, go off there. You can hang out with those guys. No, he didn't say that at all. Because his value wasn't in the money. His value was in his child. He loved his child. He gave everything to his child. His child, his son, only wanted a portion. His father was willing to give him everything. And it's the same for each one of you. Your father, your creator, your beloved is willing right now to give you everything, if only you would ask. So, ask. Don't ask for some of it, ask for all of it. Ask for everything. And what you'll discover is everything is already yours. Everything, the whole kingdom is within you. And so this is the power of stories. I could have done a long dissertation here and tried to explain this in some fantastic way, but isn't it much more interesting to hear it in this way? Doesn't it go deeper when you hear someone like Anthony de Mello, or Anthony de Mayo, I guess it's actually said, telling a funny story? That's the kind of teacher I want to be. Someone who makes people laugh, but when they laugh, they also understand. So let's take a deep breath. And just like the son in our story, who could have had everything if only he would ask. Ask. Ask your beloved to give you what you truly deserve. Everything in the kingdom. And then suddenly you realize it's always been yours. Don't ask for this or for that, or some limited portion. It is God's good pleasure to give you the whole kingdom. Right now, if only we would ask. So, Victoria, I'm going to turn to you now. And I know that it was certainly God's good pleasure that brought us to you and you to us. So we would love to hear your wisdom today.
Good morning, Brother James. Good morning, everyone. Well, I really have enjoyed the stories this morning. Thank you so much, because they do just what they're supposed to do. My mind relaxes, and I just enjoy the invitation to be. It's just another place of being, and it talks to my heart, not to my head. And last week I realized I was a little staccato because I was all over the place. I was in the Cape, and then New Hampshire, and then New Jersey, and then back to Boston. And I woke up thinking, oh, I feel a little staccato. And this morning, and your stories just helped me to relax and come back into that simple being. And that's all that truth does. It brings us back to simply being and to relaxing and letting being awaken us, and maybe let our thinking mind know that everything is okay, that we don't have to stress. There is a way to live here by effortless grace when the only thing we want is the peace of God. That's when you said, what is it you want? I want the peace of God. I woke up staccato, and staccato, I don't even know another way to describe it, but I was like staccato. So, but I relaxed, and thank you, because the peace of God is all there is. And the only way to get it is to stop dodging by thinking. That's how we get out of the way. We stop our dodging it by efforting. And like the Tao, it's like effortless grace is part of the experience to our conscious mind when we let our heart just follow the story of going home, of being home, of already having the peace of God. And there's no effort required to fix or do any of it. Anything that's in our lives. For me, anything today, I don't have to fix it or do it. I can just fall back into my heart and let the story that I am God's child, fill up in me. That's it. Let that story fill up. Thanks, Brother James. Thank you, everyone.
That is the power of desire and stories and seeing through what we think we want to what we truly desire. We talk a lot about desire and longing here, and people sometimes say, but if I already am one with God, why should I desire it? And I want to look at them and say, because you don't believe that. If you believed that, you wouldn't ask the question. You would just say, yes, I want the peace of God. That's all I want, because I know everything else will come to me easily and naturally when my desire and my longing is single, one. So as you were reading, I opened this up. You'll probably find this to be familiar. I want the peace of God. To say these words is nothing, but to mean these words is everything. If you could but mean them for just an instant, there would be no further sorrow possible for you in any form, in any place or time. Heaven would be completely given back to full awareness. Memory of God entirely restored. Memory of God entirely restored. The resurrection of all creation fully recognized. I want the peace of God, only that. When we come together, all we're really here to do is to stoke that flame, that fire, that longing for one thing, the peace of God. Not as a concept, not as a future reality, but right now. So when you hear these stories, let them be like breathing oxygen onto that fire, reminding you of what you truly want and who you truly are, who you've always been, who you couldn't stop being no matter how hard you try. And as we've said before, you have tried and you have failed. The greatest failure in the universe. And all it takes is the single desire for peace. Amen.
Amen.
So that being said, we're going to close with the Jainist prayer of peace. You know, every religion is really just a story when you think about it. Every religion can be brought down to a group of stories, and then beliefs come from the stories, and then concepts come from the beliefs, and you get lost the further in you go. But these prayers can sometimes tell the story. So this is the Jainist prayer. If you don't know, Jainism is perhaps the oldest religion that still exists in the world, primarily in India. These are the people who often, they will wear little masks over their face, and sometimes the most serious among them will walk with a little broom in front of them, because it's the religion of nonviolence. Even to step on a bug would be to break their vow. So they sweep the ground, they have a little thing in front of them so they don't inhale a bug. That's how serious. That's their story, and they're sticking with it. So let's share the Jainist prayer. Just breathe this in now. Let's just feel this together. Peace and universal love is the essence of the gospel preached by all the enlightened ones. The Lord has preached that equanimity is the Dharma. Forgive do I, creatures all, and let all creatures forgive me. Unto all have I amity, and unto none enmity. Know that violence is the root cause of all the miseries in this world. Violence, in fact, is the knot of bondage. Do not injure any living being. This is the eternal, perennial, and unalterable way of spiritual life. Do not injure any living being. A weapon, howsoever powerful it may be, can always be superseded by a superior one. But no weapon can, however, be superior to nonviolence and love. Amen. This is our prayer. This is our desire. This is our story. So thank you, everyone. I'm always thrilled when I look out and I see the amazing Pam Grout sitting in front of me, one of my favorite authors. It's always great when you're back. Maybe one of these days you can join me up here. All right, let's take a deep breath together. Why don't we sing? And since we're talking about the peace of God, just follow me. We'll do it very quietly. The peace of God is shining in me now. The peace of God is shining in me now. The peace of God is shining in me now. The peace of God is shining in me now. The peace of God is shining in me now. And so it is. Namaste, everyone. Namaste. Have a beautiful day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I love you all. Bye-bye for now.
I love you.
Okay, I'm just now seeing your hand.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Baraka, do you have anything you wanted to say? Baraka?
Yeah, I was just oming on Vicky's word staccato, and the image of a stone skipping across the water is very staccato, but eventually the stone calms down and sinks into the water and becomes it.
It's time to sink. It's time to dive. Thank you, Baraka. That's perfect. We love you guys. We love you.
Namaste.
We love
Namaste.